My son was in my kitchen, drinking my wine when I walked in. Not a hint of guilt, not even a glance back. He didn't know the house he grew up in no longer had his name on it. I laid the trust papers down between us, my signature already dry. "You're not my caretaker," I said. "You're my reminder." He opened his mouth to argue. I opened the door. The sun burned down on the back of my neck as the rental van pulled away from the gravel lot, dust curling in its wake like smoke from a bridge that had just caught fire. My own son sat in the front seat, sunglasses on, one hand on the wheel, never once checking the rearview mirror. I stood there, still holding the paper napkin I'd taken with me when I stepped out to stretch. It had a smudge of fudge from the sample the gift shop woman had pressed into my palm with a smile. I hadn't even thrown it away yet. There hadn't been time. I had only meant to take a breath, feel the wind, stretch my legs, not be left behind like a misplaced sweater. The shop behind me, a wooden structure painted a fading red with plastic sunflowers stuck in whiskey barrels, seemed to realize I was still there before my family did. I waited. At first I told myself not to worry. They'd realize it in 5 minutes, maybe 7. Maybe they thought I was in the restroom. Maybe the kids were cranky. Or my daughter-in-law, Erin, had rushed them all out with that usual clipped voice she used when she felt behind schedule. The heat simmered. The asphalt in front of the lot shimmered like water that would never quench anything. 15 minutes passed, then 30. I tried not to pace. I didn't want the store clerk or the young couple refilling their car at the pump nearby to think I was lost. I wasn't lost. I was just waiting. An hour crept by like sweat beneath my blouse. I shifted in the shade of the gift shop's porch, hoping the slats of sun between the planks wouldn't find me. My phone was dead. I had left it charging in the van along with my purse when I stepped out. I hadn't thought I'd need them. It was the quiet that started to scare me. Not the absence of voices, but the absence of concern. Not a single call, not a honk. No one shouting my name from down the road. My own son, my only child, hadn't noticed his mother wasn't in the car. I felt something cave in my stomach. Around the 2-hour mark, a family of 4, tourists from Chicago, judging by the Cub sticker on their SUV, noticed me sitting alone on the bench. The mother approached me cautiously, as if unsure whether I was homeless, confused, or simply heartbreakingly forgotten. "Are you waiting on someone?" she asked gently. "I was," I said. "Not sure anymore." They offered me their backup phone charger. I took it with trembling hands, murmuring gratitude like I'd just been handed oxygen. The screen lit up slowly. "Welcome back, Margot." 17 missed calls, all from a pharmacy robocall reminding me to refill my statins. Not a single one from my son, no text, no voicemail, no group chat, ping from Erin with her overly cheerful exclamation points, nothing. Until a minute later, my phone buzzed. Erin. "Where are you?" "We're already at the resort, no punctuation, no apology." I stared at the screen, heat rising again, not from the sun this time, but from something deeper, more dangerous. It wasn't an accident. They hadn't cared enough to check or call or even wonder why there was one extra seat left untouched in the back. They had left me behind like luggage too heavy for their itinerary. I stood slowly, the tourist mother watching me with wide eyes, maybe sensing that whatever this was, it wasn't just a bad travel mishap. It was something else, something unraveling. I smiled at her. "Thank you," I said, handing the charger back. "Looks like I've got somewhere to be." She asked if I needed a ride. I declined because something had shifted, not just in the day or the trip, but in me. And whatever happened next, I wasn't going to sit quietly for it. His voice was flat, like someone disputing a parking ticket. Not the voice of a man who had left his mother behind in 102 degrees heat. The hotel shuttle pulled up to the front loop of the mountain resort in a cloud of fine dust, the kind that clung to sweat and memory alike. Margot stepped out slowly, thanking the young gift shop clerk who had insisted on arranging the ride. She held her purse now. They'd overnighted it when she explained her situation, but the ache in her chest wasn't something she could carry in her hands. The resort was beautiful in that way high-end places always are, curated earth tones, chilled cucumber water at check-in, and a lobby that smelled faintly of lavender and expectation. She didn't look around for them, she just walked. And there he was, her son, leaning casually near a water feature, phone in hand, sunglasses still on. He looked up when he saw her, not surprised, not relieved, just mildly inconvenienced. "Mom," he said, as if she had interrupted him mid-task. "We thought you were inside." His tone held no real curiosity, no apology, as though the 2 hours she'd spent alone in a dusty parking lot were equivalent to misplacing a receipt. "I wasn't," she replied simply. Erin was seated nearby on a cushioned bench, legs crossed, scrolling her phone. She didn't look up, not even when Margot stepped fully into view. Her tone, when she finally spoke, was air-light and sharp at the edges. "Well, at least you found your way here," she said. "We were starting to think you took your own detour." Margot bit down on the instinct to respond. Instead, she pressed her palms together gently and waited. Her son reached into a small tote beside him and pulled out a plastic room key envelope. "Here," he said, handing it to her like a brochure. "You're in 304. You're with the kids." With the kids? He said it like it was helpful, like she'd be glad. She nodded once, turning the envelope over in her hand, before slipping it into her purse. No one offered to walk her up. No one asked how she was. They simply returned to their scrolling, their sun-soaked comfort, their curated vacation narrative that had no place for wrinkles, delays, or mothers left behind. The elevator ride was quiet, carpeted walls, cool air that didn't reach her bones. Room 304 was at the end of the hall. She opened the door and was greeted not with the soft ambiance of a retreat, but with the chaotic hum of sugar and cartoons. Bunk beds, a spilled bag of chips on the floor, someone's open juice box sweating on the desk. A half-inflated pool float sat propped against the closet, a pile of tiny flip-flops and damp swimsuits bunched near the balcony door. Margot stepped inside, letting the door swing closed behind her. A laminated itinerary was taped to the mini fridge, written in bold marker, with a cheerful header, Carter Family Adventure Week. She scanned it. Spa day, Erin plus mom, Erin's mom. Horseback ride, Dylan kids. Evening wine tasting, adults only. Couples massage, Dylan and Erin. Dinner banquet, formal attire required. Her name didn't appear once, not even as an afterthought, not even in parenthesis. She leaned back against the mini fridge, the cool hum of the motor vibrating softly through her spine. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her son, Dylan. "Can you watch the kids while we freshen up?" That was the moment something small and quiet inside her unclenched. Not in anger, not in grief, in clarity. They hadn't forgotten her in the parking lot. They'd simply never really included her to begin with. When I asked if I could join the winery tour, my daughter-in-law laughed. Not a full laugh, just that short, clipped sound people make when they think you're joking and also wish you were. Then she saw my face and stopped. Dinner the night before had been eaten off a paper plate while I sat cross-legged on the bunk bed, balancing lukewarm pasta and watching muted Instagram stories. There was Erin, smiling in soft focus at the resort bar, toasting a champagne flute with her mother. "Wine and women," the caption said. My son Dylan stood in the background of another post, blurry and half turned away, but still clearly there, all of them bathed in warm lighting and curated joy. No one had invited me. No one had asked if I'd eaten. The next morning I tried again. I came down to the breakfast buffet early, wearing a pressed blouse and the amber earrings Dylan had given me one Mother's Day when he still remembered. I found them tucked in the bottom of my travel bag like a forgotten kindness. The dining room was filled with soft music and the scent of fresh croissants. They were already seated, Dylan, Erin, her parents. The table looked full, but I pulled a chair from the next table over and eased myself in. "I heard you're going to the winery today," I said, unfolding my napkin. Erin glanced up from her berry parfait. "We are." Then came that laugh. "I'd like to come," I said. There was a pause. She put down her spoon. "Oh," she said. "It's mostly walking and stairs and, tight timing." She offered a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "I just think you'd slow us down." Dylan sipped his coffee, said nothing. Her mother, seated opposite me, pursed her lips and examined my outfit. "You're wearing that?" she asked. "For the family photo later." I looked down at my blouse. It was pale blue, freshly steamed, safe, respectable. I brought a sweater, I offered, though I wasn't sure why I felt the need to justify myself. Well, she sniffed, at least stand on the end of the photo. We can crop if needed. That's when I heard it. Erin leaned toward her mother, whispering just low enough to think I wouldn't hear. She insists on tagging along. We're stuck. Stuck. Like I was gum on their itinerary. My grandson, bless his brave 7-year-old heart, was buttering toast beside me. He looked up with wide, innocent eyes. Grandma, he whispered, why don't they like you? Something caught in my throat, not from pain, from clarity. Before I could answer, Dylan finally spoke. Mom, can you please just, he exhaled, try to act normal. You make everyone uncomfortable when you insert yourself like this. I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I didn't explain that I was already doing my best not to take up space. Instead, I set down my napkin, excused myself from the table, and went upstairs. In the quiet of the kids' room, with its empty bunk beds and smell of sunscreen, I sat at the small desk and stared out the window at the tour buses pulling up to the circular driveway. I watched them gather, sunglasses, wide-brimmed hats, matching pastel colors, preparing for a day that didn't include me. I realized they hadn't brought me here to be included. They brought me here to be parked, babysitter, background, burden. That night, after the kids had fallen asleep and the resort grew still, I opened my laptop. I didn't scroll. I searched luxury hotels near me, last-minute suites, and when I clicked that first link, I felt something shift. Not like rebellion, more like return. They were still at the pool when I checked into the penthouse. I knew because I watched Erin's story pop up on the resort Wi-Fi just minutes after my Uber rounded the final curve of the mountain road. In the photo, she reclined on a lounger, sunglasses on, cocktail in hand, captioned, "Sun in silence, finally." My towel was still draped on the chair beside her. 20 minutes earlier, I'd slipped out of room 304 without a sound. The kids had fallen asleep, tangled in each other's limbs after a sugar crash meltdown, and the only note I left was scrolled on resort stationery by the nightstand. Don't wait up. I'll be fine. M. The receptionist at the Sable Crest Hotel smiled at me with the kind of professional warmth that asked no questions. That was what I needed. A place where no one knew who I was or who I was supposed to be. Miss Carter, your suite is ready, she said, handing me the key card with both hands, like a gift. You'll find everything stocked just as requested. I hadn't made any special requests, but the room itself, room 1201, the penthouse, felt like it had been waiting for me anyway. The doors opened directly into a private corridor lined with warm oak panels. As I stepped inside, the suite greeted me in silence, floor-to-ceiling windows glowing gold with the last light of the day, marble counters, a chilled bottle of sparkling water on a silver tray. A bowl of fresh strawberries sat on the bar. The air smelled of linen, citrus, and luxury. I slipped off my shoes and padded across the carpet, slower than usual, letting my bones breathe. I didn't check in with anyone. I didn't tell anyone I'd arrived. Instead, I pulled on the plush white robe and stood barefoot on the terrace, looking out over the valley, as dusk pressed its lips against the edge of the sky. Below me, the town flickered to life, tiny orange lights blinking on like fireflies. No one knew I was here, no one cared. For once, both truths felt like a blessing. I ordered mint tea and mushroom risotto from room service. When it arrived, I ate it on the couch without a tray table, one leg tucked beneath me, like I used to do before I was someone's mother, someone's backup plan. Then I picked up my phone. There were 3 unread texts from Dylan, 2 from Erin. One said, "Did you leave the resort?" Another, "You could have told someone." And finally, "Let us know if you're okay." The kids asked. I stared at those words for a long time, waiting for them to mean more than they did. Then I opened my contacts and blocked both of their numbers, not permanently, just long enough. I slid the switch to Do Not Disturb, set the phone on the marble counter face down, and took a deep breath. Then I opened the leather-bound journal the hotel had tucked into the desk drawer, probably meant for executives or honeymooners jotting down bucket lists, and began to write. Not about them. About me. My handwriting was rusty, cramped, uneven, but the ink flowed as if it had been waiting inside me all this time. I wrote about the woman I'd been before the house and the bills and the hand-me-down dignity. I wrote about the child I'd always wanted and never received, someone who would have noticed when I was gone, who would have waited 5 minutes longer. The grief sat beside me like an old friend, uninvited but not unwelcome. For the first time in years, I didn't feel lonely. I felt clear. And then the phone rang. Not the cell, still face down and silenced. The suite's landline, a crisp, old-world sound that echoed strangely in the wide room. I picked it up. "Mrs. Carter?" the concierge asked. "There's a man downstairs asking to speak with you. He says it's urgent." I closed my eyes. Dylan had found me, but something in the concierge's tone told me it wasn't concern he'd brought with him. He said he missed me, but he couldn't name what color my coat had been that morning, the morning he left me in a gravel parking lot without looking back. The elevator down to the hotel lobby moved slow, as if it too was reluctant to bring me to him. I caught my reflection in the polished panel, robe swapped for slacks, a soft blouse, no makeup, hair pulled back in the same quiet way I always wore it when I needed to be clear-headed. Dylan stood near the concierge desk, hands in his pockets, that tight-lipped smile he used when things were about to get inconvenient. He was dressed well, khakis, a polo, watch face gleaming just enough to be noticed. He didn't look worried, just mildly put out. "Mom," he said, stepping forward like I might vanish again. "You scared us. You didn't tell anyone where you were going." I let the silence hang a beat too long before answering. "I wasn't aware I had to." He blinked, caught off guard by the absence of apology. Then he recovered with a soft laugh, the kind people use when trying to keep the upper hand. "We thought maybe you wandered off. Erin was worried." I raised an eyebrow. "She texted you," he added. "I remember." I kept my voice smooth. "It was very brief." He shifted his weight, glanced toward the front desk, then back at me. "Look, since you're here, and I'm glad you are, but, about the rental van paperwork." There it was. I watched his eyes dance around the phrasing, looking for a way to make the request sound incidental. "They said we need to update the alternate driver's info," he continued. "Your license is still listed, and since you didn't ride back with us, the agency flagged it." I tilted my head, arms folding. "You came here for my ID?" I asked, voice gentle, too gentle. He hesitated. "Well, I came to check on you, and—" "Did you come check on the kids when I was the only one with them?" I asked. "Or when I missed dinner? Or when I wasn't in a single photo from the day?" That wiped the performance off his face. Dylan sighed and looked away. "Come on, Mom. Don't make this into a thing. We just didn't expect all this." "All this?" I echoed. "This disappearing act." I smiled. It surprised even me. "I didn't disappear, Dylan," I said. "I just stopped waiting to be noticed." He glanced down at his phone, uncomfortable. "The kids miss you," he said finally, softening his tone. "They'll be fine," I replied. "Children adapt." He stared at me for a long moment. I couldn't tell if he was searching for the mother he remembered or resenting the one who stood here now. "I already extended the suite," I said, before he could speak again. "I'll be here all week." Something flickered in his expression, a mix of surprise and calculation. I knew that look. It meant he was mentally rearranging plans I hadn't been part of to begin with. "I should get back upstairs," I said. "Room service is bringing up mint tea." He didn't move to follow, just nodded stiffly. "Okay. Well, see you around." I walked him to the elevator and pressed the button without a word. When the doors opened, he stepped inside and turned to face me. I didn't wave, I didn't reach. I let the doors close between us like a quiet boundary. Back in the suite, I slipped off my shoes, walked to the balcony, and took a long breath. The air was cool, untouched by anyone else's expectations. Then, slowly, deliberately, I locked the door behind me. And for the first time all trip, the room finally felt like it was mine. They posted a family photo that night. I wasn't in it. The caption said, "Grateful for everyone who made this possible." I stared at the screen for a long time, thumb hovering, heart tight. The photo was staged, of course it was. Erin had a talent for that sort of thing. Everyone stood on the wooden overlook outside the resort restaurant, backlit by a golden hour sunlight. Dylan had one arm slung around her shoulders, the other holding their youngest daughter, who wore a straw hat far too big for her head. Aaron's parents stood beside them, champagne glasses raised, tag after tag, and Dylan Carter, a mom and me style, a mountain escape, not mine, not once. They'd captioned it like a memory, but it felt more like a message. I tapped through to the next story, a boomerang loop of a champagne toast, Aaron's voice chirping, "So glad we got our kind of people together this week." The clink of glass hit harder than it should have. In the corner of the frame, I saw it, a flash of silver, a necklace, one I recognized instantly. I'd given it to Aaron's mother 2 Christmases ago, a delicate silver chain with a rose quartz pendant. "It's for healing," I'd said when I'd handed it over, the box wrapped in gold tissue. Her smile tight and ungrateful. Now she wore it like it was hers by birthright, not memory. I clicked my phone off and let the screen go black. The room was dim, the sky outside bruised with dusk. I sat on the bed in my robe, feet tucked beneath me, and reached for the hotel journal on the nightstand. My handwriting was shaky at first, the pen dragging across the page like it needed coaxing, but the words came anyway. "I wasn't forgotten," I wrote. "I was never really included." Tears slipped down my cheek in slow, stubborn lines, not dramatic, just honest. I didn't bother to wipe them away. They hadn't brought me here because they wanted me. They'd brought me because they had to, because not inviting your mother to the family trip felt too obviously cruel, but including her just enough to say she was there, that was palatable, expected, performative. They needed someone to watch the kids, take the pictures, fill the space, but not someone who might exist fully, speak, take part, be seen. I opened the drawer beside me, the one with the soft, close glide, and pulled out the envelope I hadn't touched since packing. Inside was the deed. Thick cardstock, notary stamp, pressing through like a fingerprint. My house, still in my name. I had let them believe it was a shared thing, the family home. But I never added Dylan or Aaron to the title, even after Dylan borrowed against its equity, even after they painted over my memories with sleek granite and white gloss. Deep down I knew. They never saw it as mine, just something they'd inherit once I was no longer useful. I set the deed on the bed beside me, small in size, heavy in meaning. "Maybe," I whispered, "it's time they remembered whose roof they live under." I closed the drawer gently, picked up my phone, and searched for a name I hadn't dialed in years, a real estate attorney from another life. Her website looked newer, but her voice hadn't changed. "Hi," I said. "I'd like a consultation, first thing tomorrow." Click keys, confirmation. "Let's talk about what's yours," she replied. They wanted a matriarch they could mute. I gave them one who still held the deed. Now, in a quiet law office, scented with lilies and espresso, I was ready to follow that instinct through. Enz Morales, my lawyer, looked up from the paperwork. "You've maintained full title. No co-owners, no addendums. You can restructure without anyone's consent." "I know," I said. "You're placing it in a trust?" "Yes, irrevocable. I stay the controlling trustee. No successors unless I name them. And the beneficiary—" I paused. "Not my son." She blinked. "We can set conduct reviews, 5-year intervals." "They won't matter," I said. "Let's not pretend." Enz nodded slowly, clicked her pen, and began filling out the transfer packet. We moved through the documents like surgeons, steady, decisive. Page after page of boundary making, line after line of new terms. No room left for guilt, no room for misinterpretation. When it was done, she slid the final paper toward me. "One signature, you sure?" I picked up the pen. "For the first time," I said, pressing it to the line. "Yes." The ink bled like quiet thunder across the bottom of the page. As I gathered my things and stood to leave, I felt taller, not in height, but in density, like I was taking up my own space again for the first time in years. The waiting room was quiet, the same lilies on the front desk still held their shape, the same soft jazz played overhead. Nothing had changed except everything had. And then, just as I reached for the door, it opened. Aaron's mother stepped in, her posture regal as ever, her sunglasses still perched on top of her head despite the indoor lighting. She didn't see me at first. She was too busy flipping through a leather-bound planner, speaking to the receptionist. Here, about a consolidation, she said. Real estate portfolio. My son-in-law and I are reviewing inheritance strategy. I froze, my breath caught behind my ribs. It wasn't coincidence. She was trying to tie up my house, and she didn't even know I'd already cut the string. I slipped out before she could see me, but as I stepped into the sunlight, the truth followed me out the door like a shadow. They weren't waiting for me to die, they were planning for it. I watched her through the tinted glass. She didn't see me, she didn't even know what I owned. Aaron's mother stood on the sidewalk outside a modern glass building in town, the kind of place with automatic doors, zero charm, and a waiting area scented like new carpet. She was smiling, animated, one hand on her hip, as she laughed with a man in a navy blazer. He was tall, polished, clipboard in hand. A real estate agent, the kind who spoke in property value and square footage, not roots or memory. They shook hands in that eager way people do when they've already made up their minds. I cracked the car window just enough to hear the breeze carrying clipped phrases through the June air like dry leaves. Once it's in his name, the agent said, flipping a page on his folder, we can finally modernize, get rid of all that older structural stuff, open it up. Aaron's mother chuckled. Exactly, too much wood, too many corners. It's time for something brighter. Brighter? I gripped the steering wheel, not tight, just enough. They weren't just planning changes, they were erasing me. The porch swing, the stained glass panel by the stairs, the arch Dylan ran through when he was 8 with a popsicle melting down his arm. They had already mentally bulldozed it all. History was inconvenient when it didn't come with resale value. I didn't get out of the car, I didn't confront. Instead, I drove 15 minutes up the hill. I found a pull-off with a view, the kind you only find when you're not looking. A small wooden bench overlooked the whole valley, quiet except for the faint rustle of wind slipping through the sagebrush. I sat and let the truth settle around me like dust. They didn't want me. They didn't even want my house. They wanted the idea of it, its status, its zip code, its curb appeal. Not the nail holes in the walls where baby pictures used to hang, not the windows I'd recaulked myself when the draft came in. Too strong that winter, Dylan couldn't afford a new heater. They wanted the skeleton, not the soul. And to them, I wasn't even a tenant of that soul. I was the placeholder, the delay, the thing they had to wait out before the property became usable. I drove back to the hotel in silence. No music, no voice navigation, just the sound of my own breath steady now, because grief sometimes sharpens into clarity. Upstairs, I didn't pour wine. I didn't scream. I sat at the desk, opened the journal again, and began writing, but not to them, to myself. I didn't lose my family. I just stopped pretending I had one. I built a home, and they brought blueprints for something else. I gave them roots, and they packed luggage. I was their foundation. They just painted over me. I closed the journal softly, slid it into the drawer. The suite glowed with the soft hush of sunset, long shadows, golden trim along the floor, the hum of a refrigerator holding strawberries, and silence. Later, I changed into night clothes and turned off the lights, letting the room go dark, except for the skyline through the window. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a voicemail from Dylan. His voice was tight, unsteady, the tone he used when he wanted to sound calm but was losing control. Mom, I need to talk. It's urgent. I stared at the blinking dot on the screen but didn't press play. The message said urgent, but the call didn't come until 10:04 p.m. I had just turned down the lights in the penthouse suite, the city below flickering with the hush of winding down. The air smelled faintly of eucalyptus from the spa candle I'd let burn for an hour. I was in the middle of folding the plush white blanket at the foot of the bed, letting the quiet settle, that kind of quiet you don't notice until you realize how long you've been living without it. Then the phone buzzed. Voicemail. Dylan Carter, one new message. Before I could open it, the screen lit up again. Incoming call. I picked up after the second ring. Hello? Mom? He said, like he was testing the word out. Not warm, not urgent, just thin. I waited. We've got a bit of a situation, he said, followed by a breath he probably thought would soften it. The Airbnb were locked out. The payment got declined for some reason, and the host says the card on file isn't working. A pause. You booked it in my name? I asked, keeping my tone flat. It autofilled, he said too quickly. From that form last year, remember? I didn't even realize until now. I sat on the bed, the silk of my robe whispering across the covers. And what exactly are you asking me for? Well, could you just fix it? Just this once? Like I was being asked to grab something from the kitchen. I stood, walked to the desk, picked up the hotel notepad. What's the confirmation number? A pause. Then, it's 498 BT23. I wrote it down, hung up, no goodbye. Then I called the Airbnb host, using the old number still synced in my inbox. Yes, Mrs. Carter, she chirped. A man came earlier, said you'd be arriving later. He was unloading your car. And the card? I asked. Paid in full. Card ending in 6248. Dylan's wedding. A single spreadsheet. One card, long forgotten. I thanked her and hung up. Then I logged into my bank app, froze the card, flagged the charge, filed a claim. It took 4 minutes to undo what had taken years to erode. Trust. I looked at my reflection in the dark window, city lights crowning my head. Then I snapped a photo. No smile, no filter, just me. I uploaded it with a caption, room service and boundaries, both delivered. It wasn't for show, it was for signal. Minutes later, Aaron commented, So, this is what we're doing now? No warmth, just guilt, dressed as confusion. I turned off comments, restricted visibility. He wasn't in my circle anymore. I didn't reply. Instead, I poured a glass of lemon water, sat by the window, and breathed. They had always called when something broke, but this time, what broke was me, and I was the one fixing it. She said I was being dramatic, so I sent her a screenshot. The morning air in the suite was cool, almost too crisp from the air conditioning I'd left humming overnight. I sat at the desk by the window, robe cinched around my waist, fingers tracing the rim of my teacup, still too hot to sip. The city below moved slowly, its buildings casting long shadows like stretched-out truths. My phone lit up again. Aaron Carter Life had replied to my photo. So this is what we're doing now. No question mark could soften the condescension laced in those words. No filtered selfie on her feed could hide how calculated her timing was, just late enough to seem like surprise, just early enough to feel rehearsed. I didn't flinch. Instead, I leaned forward and calmly typed beneath her comment, Don't worry, the suite's on me, like the Airbnb was. I didn't need to tag her. The message was direct enough, and I knew her circle would see it. Her curated tribe of school moms, wine night friends, and image polishers, most of whom had quietly followed me back after years of wedding photos and birthday parties and sweet family moments posted for show. Within 10 minutes, the comment section was alive. A cousin posted a heart emoji. Someone I didn't know replied, Yikes, this got real. A distant aunt commented, I knew Margot didn't just vanish. And someone else simply typed, Receipts. By the time I refreshed the page, Aaron's original comment had been deleted. But deletion doesn't erase a digital footprint, and it certainly doesn't undo intention. My phone buzzed again. A call this time. Dylan. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. His voice was tight, clipped between practiced patience and coiled frustration. Why are you turning this into a show? I didn't start the performance, I said, leaning back in my chair. I just stopped pretending I was part of the audience. He scoffed, a dry, humorless sound. This is private family stuff. You're putting it out there like you didn't use my card? I cut in. Like you didn't leave me at a roadside lot and send a single sentence text? He was quiet, the kind of quiet people use when they're cycling through every excuse and finding none of them land safely. I didn't give him time to answer. You wanted silence because it made you comfortable. And now, when I speak, I'm dramatic? He exhaled sharply. We didn't mean, you meant everything you did, I said. You just didn't mean to be caught in it. I hung up before he could spiral into defense. Then I opened my email. I pulled together the receipts I'd kept, not metaphorical ones, literal PDFs and scans. The $12,000 wedding deposit I'd paid directly to the venue, the florist invoice with my bank transfer ID, the car lease cosign form I was never taken off, the school tuition invoice with my billing address still listed, years of invisible lines now dragged into the light. I compiled them in a folder, labeled it Trust Protection Personal Funds, and forwarded it to my attorney. Subject line, documentation for full discretion clause. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again, not from Dylan, not from Aaron, from Enz Morales, my attorney. Her reply was one line, measured and bold in its simplicity. Do you want to add a no contact clause in the trust terms? I stared at the screen for a moment, letting the question settle. Not can you, not should you, but do you want to? The power, for once, was mine. He only ever called when something broke: the dishwasher, the daycare plan, the engine light on Aaron's car. This time, what broke was me, not all at once, but in pieces, quiet, polite, cracks that had been forming for years, like porcelain you keep gluing together because you love the shape, not realizing that someday it will just give up under its own weight. I sat curled into the corner of the oversized armchair in the penthouse living room, the city lights flickering behind me like a warning I no longer needed to heed. My phone lay face down on the glass coffee table, the last text from Dylan still glowing in my mind, even after I closed the screen. Just know when Grandma's money runs out, we won't be there. No pretense this time, no smiley face, no guilt-laced question marks, just threat wrapped in inevitability. It was strange how calm I felt, because once a message like that would have broken me, or more truthfully, bent me into shapes that fit inside their narrative of what a mother should be: someone dependable, quiet, perpetually available, the one who signs the checks, watches the kids, says, "Don't worry about it," with a smile and a deposit slip. I had been the emergency contact on every school form, hospital intake sheet, travel waiver, but never the first call on a birthday, never the name remembered in a thank you speech. And yet I had always shown up, with groceries, with tuition top-ups, with babysitting so they could reconnect. I filled the cracks in their lives without ever being allowed to be anything other than filler. Until now. Now, the penthouse didn't feel like escape, it felt like detox. I walked barefoot across the cool floor to the tablet on the nightstand and tapped the screen for room service. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to check the prices. I ordered what I wanted: grilled salmon, a glass of wine, and a chocolate souffle I wouldn't need to share with sticky fingers or apologetic smiles. When it arrived, the concierge brought it up himself, a tall man in a black vest and white gloves who offered me the tray like a ceremony. He placed it gently on the table and gave me a practiced smile. "Celebrating anything special tonight, Mrs. Carter?" he asked. I paused, looking at the perfectly plated meal, the chilled wine glass, the silence that wasn't loneliness. "Yes," I said, "my own peace." His smile faltered just slightly, not rudely, just curiously, before he nodded and left with a quiet, "Enjoy your evening." And I did. I let each bite linger. I sipped the wine slowly. I watched the sky darken beyond the windows and felt no ache in my chest when I realized no one knew what I was eating. No one cared what time I came back to the room. No one expected me to do anything but be exactly where I was. That, I realized, was the gift: freedom, not from obligation, but from erasure. When the meal was done, I placed the tray outside the door, washed my face, and sat down once more with my journal. I didn't write anything poetic, just 3 words: "I remember now." Then, without hesitation, I picked up my phone and opened Dylan's contact. Blocked. Slowly, deliberately. The screen felt lighter afterward. So did I. I set the phone down and exhaled, long, full, final. And then it rang. The room's landline buzzed softly beside the bed, its glow steady in the dim light. I lifted the receiver. "This is the front desk," the voice said. "There's someone here asking for you." I didn't speak, just waited for the name that would follow. He stood in the hotel lobby, holding a bouquet of flowers like they were supposed to erase the smell of everything he'd let rot. The flowers were nice, roses, white and peach, too fresh to have been an afterthought. But I'd seen better apologies in commercials, and worse ones from him. I watched from behind one of the lobby's marble columns, out of his line of sight. The front desk was busy, quiet hums of conversation and tapping keys, but his voice carried. It always had, the kind of tone meant to charm even when the words were empty. She's expecting me, he said, adjusting the bouquet in his arms like it was proof of sincerity. I'm her son. The concierge raised an eyebrow. We were told not to announce guests without confirmation. Dylan gave a light laugh, his old oops, but I'm charming laugh. I just need 5 minutes. She's confused about how this trust thing works. I didn't move, didn't blink. He knew, not about the hotel or the dinner post, but about the trust, about me finally protecting what had never been his, myself. She's using it to make a scene, he added quietly. We've been patient, but this is crossing a line. I opened a new message to the concierge. Please inform the guest I'm unavailable. Indefinitely, Mr. Carter. Seconds later, the concierge read it, stood straighter. I'm sorry, sir, Mrs. Carter is not available. Shall we deliver the flowers to her suite? Dylan hesitated, then dropped the bouquet on the counter. No, that's fine. He turned away, jaw tight, performance faltering now that I'd stopped playing my part. I didn't wave, didn't speak. I had offered everything already. He spent it like pocket change. Back upstairs, I settled into the velvet chair, shadows pooling like ink. I picked up my nearly full hotel journal and wrote one line, Your silence is no longer a gift, because that's what I'd been taught. To give quietly. PTA forms, birthday parties, credit card help, college forms signed but never credited, slice by slice, until I barely belonged to myself. And when I paused, when I chose me, suddenly I was dramatic, petty, difficult, but I wasn't angry anymore, just awake. I stood by the window, letting the city lights spill over me. The glass was cold. Honest. Then my phone buzzed. Property management app. Access code 28119 used at front door. 9:08 p.m. My breath caught. They were in my house, without permission, without warning, and they had no idea. It didn't belong to them anymore. The smell hit me first, my lavender dish soap, warmed by the sun filtering through the kitchen window, mingling with the unmistakable scent of reheated leftovers and wine. I paused just inside the front door, listening to the quiet laughter echoing from the back of the house. The sound was too at home, too settled. They hadn't just come to check on things. I stepped forward slowly and purposefully, the soles of my shoes tapping across the hardwood in a rhythm they should have recognized. The closer I moved toward the kitchen, the clearer their voices became, unhurried, low, full of the same casual confidence I'd once mistaken for love. Rounding the corner, I saw them. Dylan sat at the end of my kitchen table, my table, digging his fork into the last square of peach cobbler I'd frozen in spring, the one I'd made from the fruit in the backyard tree I planted the year his daughter was born. Erin leaned against the counter with her glass of red wine, the stem pinched loosely between two fingers like she was on vacation. A half-burned candle flickered near the sink. They had lit it, my candle, without asking. Neither of them noticed me at first. Erin was mid-sentence. We could move the sideboard to the back wall, open this whole area up. My mother says it's dated. Dylan made a non-committal sound, chewing. Sure, but that thing's heavy. I'll get a team once the paperwork's finalized. That's when I cleared my throat. Erin's spine went stiff. Dylan's fork froze in midair. I stepped fully into the doorway, setting my purse on the counter with deliberate care. I let the silence thicken between us before I spoke. You made yourselves comfortable. Erin recovered first, smiling too quickly. Oh, Margot, you're back early. We were just checking on things. I finished for her, I said. Yes, I heard. Dylan stood, brushing crumbs from his hands. We didn't know when you were coming back. Thought it made sense to keep an eye on the house. I said nothing. I didn't need to. Instead, I unzipped the outer pocket of my bag and pulled out the thick folder I'd carried like armor all week. I walked over to the counter, my counter, the same one where I'd rolled out birthday cookie dough and pressed love into decades of meals, and laid the paperwork down. The pages fanned out neatly, notarized, certified, final. "I came to deliver this," I said, tapping the front page. "Confirmation of trust transfer, filed yesterday morning. This house is no longer a shared family asset." Erin's face tightened as she stepped forward, eyes scanning the documents as if squinting would make them disappear. "You transferred the house?" she asked, her tone teetering between shock and disbelief. "I protected it," I said, calm and even. "I am now the sole trustee, and no one, not you, not Dylan, has any claim to it." Dylan's voice was soft but strained. "Mom, why would you do that?" I looked at him and saw not the boy I raised, but the man who had left me in a parking lot without a backward glance. "Because you already decided I didn't belong in this house. I'm simply agreeing with you, legally." Erin tried to laugh, but it sounded hollow. "You're overreacting." "No," I said. "You're overestimating your entitlement." The silence that followed was thicker than anything we'd ever shared in this room. Dylan looked down at the papers again, still trying to find a loophole in the ink. Erin stepped back, crossing her arms. "So what? You want us to leave right now?" I didn't answer. I simply walked to the front door, opened it wide, and let the breeze roll in. The late afternoon sun slanted across the floor, touching the edge of the paperwork with light, like a signature from nature itself. "You have until the end of the week," I said, without raising my voice. "After that, this becomes a legal matter." Dylan stared at me like he didn't recognize the woman standing there. Erin looked away first. Without a word, she turned, set her wine glass on the table, and began gathering her things. Dylan followed, and I stood there, steady as the doorframe, watching them leave, the same way they'd always arrived, without thanks, without apology, without hesitation. But this time I didn't flinch, because for once, the Locks belonged to me. They called me cruel, but my kindness only made them careless. The next morning, I stood by the entryway, the early light catching the edge of the doorknob, and watched the locksmith finish installing the new keypad. His hands moved quickly, confidently, the way people do when they've done something dozens of times before. But for me, this was a first. "Code set," he said, straightening with a slight grunt. "You'll get notifications anytime it's used. Garage access is rekeyed too. New frequency synced to the remote." I nodded, holding the small fob he handed me like a key to something larger. "And the old code, deactivated completely," he said. "Whoever had it, they won't get past the driveway." That was exactly the point. After he left, I closed the door and stood there for a moment, letting the silence stretch across the foyer. I breathed it in, deep and quiet, clean wood polish, spring air through the open window, faint scent of rosemary from the kitchen where fresh herbs sat in a small vase. Everything felt new, even though nothing had physically changed. Except now, every inch of this home belonged to me in more than just name. I opened my laptop at the dining table and logged into the shared file Enz had prepared. She titled it, "Carter Family Trust Amendment Provisions." Inside were the documents I'd asked for, waiting for a final signature. One removed Dylan and Erin permanently from the beneficiary list. The other added two unexpected entries: 20% to a local hospice organization that had cared for my sister-in-law during her final days, 30% to a women's recovery center where I'd quietly attended therapy during the hardest years of my marriage. Both names came with stories I didn't need to explain to anyone. They were mine to give. Once signed, I closed the laptop and moved to the kitchen, setting out a linen runner and 3 mismatched plates. China I'd collected over years, each with a history more real than the people I'd just evicted. By 6 o'clock, the house no longer felt like a battleground. It felt like somewhere to begin. Joan arrived first, carrying a lemon tart and humming off-key. Sandra followed, still in her nursing scrubs, her silver hoops clinking against her phone as she ended a call. Then Miriam, who brought wine and a loud laugh that bounced off the walls and made the place feel more alive than it had in months. We didn't talk about families. We didn't talk about guilt. We talked about music, spring gardens, and whether wine really did taste better from a stem glass. We passed the tart around with our hands and used paper napkins from the same drawer I once stocked obsessively for guests who never said thank you. At one point, Miriam raised her glass and glanced toward the door. They ever try to come back? She said, smirking. Charge them valet. The table broke into laughter, even me. I raised my own glass. To the life, I said softly, that began in a parking lot. The moment stretched, quiet and warm, like a sweater pulled over the shoulders at just the right time. No applause, no drama, just peace. And then a knock. Not loud, not hurried, just unexpected. I glanced toward the door, my body already reading the shape of the sound. Not Dylan, not Aaron. Too light, too unfamiliar. I stepped into the hallway and peeked through the glass. A girl, 16, maybe 17, stood on the porch, clutching a yellow envelope to her chest. Her jeans were too short, the cuffs frayed. Her hair was tied back with something that looked like a shoelace, but it was her eyes, uncertain, familiar, that made me open the door without speaking. She looked up. "Are you Mrs. Carter?" she asked, voice steady but barely. I nodded once. "This is for you," she said, holding the envelope out like it weighed more than it should. I took it from her carefully. No return address, just my name written in soft, slanted handwriting. The handwriting stopped me cold. It wasn't Dylan's. It wasn't Aaron's. It was soft, slightly crooked, a looped G and lowercase I, dotted with hearts so faint I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't been holding the envelope in both hands. The girl who delivered it was already gone. The yellow envelope trembled slightly between my fingers as I walked it back inside, the door shutting behind me with a gentle click that felt heavier than it should have. I sat at the dining table, still warm from laughter and lemon tart, and opened it with the carefulness reserved for old photographs or fragile things that speak the truth. The letter was one page, lined paper torn from a spiral notebook. "Dear Grandma, I didn't know. I thought you just disappeared. They said you needed space, but they laughed like it was a joke. I heard them whisper things they didn't mean for me to hear. Dad said you were making a scene. Mom rolled her eyes when I asked if we were going to visit you. I know I'm not supposed to pick sides, but I think you were on mine this whole time. I'm sorry. Love, Lena." I didn't cry. Not at first. I just stared at the uneven letters, the tiny apology that somehow weighed more than all the excuses and silence that had come before it. She hadn't written it to get something. Not approval, not inheritance, not redemption. Just to tell the truth. A rare thing in this family. I pulled out a small ivory card from the drawer, my old stationery, yellowing slightly at the corners, the last remnant from when people still wrote thank you notes. On it, I wrote in steady ink, "Doors aren't closed forever, just locked from those who never knocked. You knocked. Thank you." I folded it, tucked it into a matching envelope, and placed it by the door for the concierge to mail in the morning. Then I stood in the quiet of my living room, the one they'd tried to take, reshape, inherit, and looked around. There was nothing more for me to do here. The next morning, I checked out of the penthouse suite. No fanfare, no drama, just a swipe of a card, a polite thank you to the staff, and the hum of my suitcase wheels trailing behind me across the marble floor. But I didn't go back to the house. I had something else in mind. At the airport, I booked a one-way ticket to Santa Fe. I didn't need to check the weather or look up hotel reviews. I wasn't chasing comfort. I was chasing space, color, silence that didn't ache, a city that knew how to honor the old while welcoming something new. The art retreat had always been one of those whispered dreams, saved for someday, someday when I wasn't needed, when the house didn't need cleaning, when the grandkids didn't need rides, when I wasn't too tired or too late or too obligated. Someday had arrived, and it was mine. By late afternoon, I stood in a sunlit studio, surrounded by strangers who didn't know my last name, who hadn't watched me raise a son into a man who unlearned everything kind. In front of me stood a blank canvas, taller than I expected, wide and waiting. I held a brush in one hand, the folded deed, now a symbol more than a document, tucked into my jacket pocket. I dipped the bristles in cobalt blue, the color of dusk, of boldness, of starting over. I didn't paint right away. I stood there, breathing in the scent of raw canvas, linseed oil, and quiet possibility. And then, finally, I moved. One stroke, then another, no plan, no fear, just motion, just color. I heard Lena's voice in my memory, soft and unassuming. "I thought you just disappeared." But I hadn't. I'd stepped out of the frame they painted me into and into a scene of my own design. They left me in a parking lot,